I'm going to be interviewing my grandmother about the 60s and her experience and how it shaped her life. So I hope it's okay if I ask you a couple questions.
It is.
So thank you. I just want to know where you grew up in the 60s.
I grew up in a small, what we consider diverse community in Edgewood, Rhode Island, where the church, the schools, anything recreational was close, within a couple of miles of each other. We had the ability as a teen back then to feel freedom and kind of push the boundaries, but we also knew the safety net of home was close by. So we were pretty lucky as teenagers back then. A bit different than it is today, where the children have much more pressure.
Okay. And I know a lot of people, teenagers mostly, didn't get along with their parents at that time. What was your relationship with your mother and your father?
My relationship with my mom was a typical mother-daughter relationship. She was pretty strict. Dad was the more easygoing guy, but when it came to conversations about the war, things were a little more tense. During that time, the whole country tensions were escalating, and you had the nonconformist and the establishment, which my parents and most parents at that time represented. So it was difficult because we thought that we had no business being in a conflict over another country where we were sending our young men over to fight when other countries previous to that had failed, such as France. So we thought we could go in and we could make a difference, but we knew historically that other countries didn't fare well.
Okay, so as teenagers, you outright didn't believe or agree with anything that was going on in the war?
Yeah, anything with the war and anything anti-establishment, we wanted to, we put up boundaries and fought against.
So I understand that your father was a veteran.
Mm-hmm.
What was that relationship like? I know you said you guys had your differences, but overall, was it a healthy relationship?
Yeah, that was really the only sticking point. Obviously, I was a bit louder and more outspoken than some of the other teens at that time. I empathized with the military that were over there and their families. So at that time, I was more rigid and outspoken. I think looking back that if I had at least sat and listened to my dad and heard his viewpoint, but at that time, as teenagers, we sometimes put that wall up and we don't want to listen to anything parents have to say. But I think with maturity, you look back and you think, oh, I could have done it a little differently.
Okay. So as if you could go back and talk to your teenage self, you would tell her that just listen to what your father had to say. Although you don't agree with him, you would tell her that he has, the right intentions and what's going on isn't completely wrong.
I think so, yes. I think that I would be more receptive to listening to him and not thinking that I was always on the right side because they represented establishment, they were on the wrong side, yes.
Okay. And I know that there's the hippie side and the outspoken teenager side, and as you said, you were more of an outspoken teenager.
I consider that I was more of an outspoken teenager. I wasn't the typical hippie that the West Coast, the Haight-Ashbury society represented. I wasn't always appropriate, outspoken at dinner conversation when families were there in company, but I thought it was almost like my rite of passage. My parents were very tolerant of me. I was very fortunate.
And there were many protests. Did you attend any? Did you watch any of the protests you've seen or take part in influenced your life?
I did attend some really not real organized sit-ins and things like that in my early teenage years. And then in the 70s, more organized, more environmental type protests I attended.
Okay, and those protests, they influence your life? Did they make you more of a free spirit? Did they later form you to become more of a stern adult, or?
I think the 60s provided me with a benchmark of my makeup today. And I like to think that I'm socially aware of my surroundings, not just in the United States, but the world around. And also, I pride myself in looking at you and your mom and your aunt, that they were always socially aware and that you always put yourself out there and you want to give back. So I'd like to think that I had a little part in that.
Okay. And I know that many teens, some presented their parents with the protest and what they stood for in the 60s. And you said your father and you had a very healthy relationship other than this point of the 60s.
Mhm.
What, as you grew older, did you still remain close, or did you become distant with him?
No, I was lucky. I have very, very tolerant parents. Um, that we knew that we had to do some repair work over the Vietnam um, conflict. We were lucky that when they were erecting the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, they had a moving wall, and it went from, I'm not sure how many cities in the United States, but they did touch on many cities throughout America. And Providence, which is close to Edgewood, was one of them. So my father and I were lucky to go down there. Just the two of us went together. So they gave us time to look and reflect back, and I think that did a lot for the country, their families, military families, and anyone that was touched on the war. Since that time, our relationship, we pretty much mended any conflicts or issues that we had, and I'm lucky that he now rests over at the Veterans Cemetery in Exeter with his other brother. So it was nice that we got to have that time.
Now, did you have any relatives who were part of the Vietnam War?
I did. My uncle, the youngest one, Bobby.
Was he your brother's brother of your father, brother of your mother?
Yep, he was my father's youngest brother. His name was Bobby. And I vividly remembered the day that we found out. I had just gone to bed, and my mom had come in and told us that Bobby had died, was killed in action. He had gone over a landmine. Instead of the military going to see Bobby's mother, my dad's mother, they went to, my dad always worked like a second job for extra income. They went there and told my father. And my father quickly convened all the other siblings and called the rescue also at the same time, because they knew that their mom would not do well with it, because this was the baby that she lost, but she also lost her oldest son in World War II. So they're a very close-knit family, and my dad just pulled that together, and he convened everyone.
Okay, and is your Uncle Bobby, is he on that wall in the wall of Vietnam in D.C.?
He is, and you and your mom and I went down to Washington, so we were lucky. We got to see the World War II Memorial, where my Leo, my oldest uncle, fought and died. We got to go to Korean, where my dad served, and we got to go and take an imprint of Bobby's name on the Vietnam Memorial, so I was fortunate enough to do that with you.
Okay, so I guess this, my final question, just overall about, teenage life in the 60s leading into the 70s. Just for you, was it easy? Was it, were there difficult parts? Just how did you feel about being a teenager in this time?
It was a tumultuous time. I think everyone was stretching boundaries. We were told we had to act like our parents and get married and have children young, but the other side was that anti-establishment, that we had to do everything that our parents didn't want. We had to work against that. So it was a conflicting time for us, but I think it made us better adults. I think we're most socially aware. I think environmentally we're more aware. The whole Do Not Litter campaign started with our generation. So a lot of good things came of the 60s, and that's creativity. With conflicts come creativity, I believe. So we were really fortunate to live during that time.
Okay, well, thank you for answering my questions,
You're welcome, Ray.
and I hope that it provided information for all of you. Thank you.